Hello and welcome to Opening the Books, number 3, the third episode of this I've ever done with my good friends Ben and Kevin from Pretty Boy, an up-and-coming men's skincare, men's grooming, men's personal care, eventually a whole empire of things if they have it their way. They've got big dreams, big visions for where this whole thing is going. Really talented couple of entrepreneurs who've seen some initial success and are trying to scale it, and we're going to talk about how to do it. If you've never listened to or watched an Opening the Books episode of my podcast before, there are 2 previous ones to this with Mixed by Nazarene and Beard Brand. Beard Brand actually somewhat similar category to the Pretty Boy guys, but a little bit very different stage of their journey. Each of these episodes does the same thing, which is that basically I am going to record a call, a consulting coaching call with these guys in their business. I'm going to spend some time working through what they are doing, where they're trying to go, and how we can help them get there. And they have agreed to share with radical levels of transparency actual stuff in the business, including like real numbers for revenue, real numbers for ad spend. Like we may open up their ad account and go look at it and talk about their setup exactly as it is. And the goal of this is to give you, the viewer of this episode, and maybe the listener, though I recommend often that you view these because we do a lot of screen shares and that sort of thing, real insight into not just like what happened after the fact, which is what a lot of podcast interviews are, but like, what would you do right now in a business? What are the real numbers going on in a business? And how can you learn from what smart and talented entrepreneurs are doing and from any advice that I would give them along the way? So Ben and Kevin are here. We're going to talk about Pretty Boy, really cool brand. You're going to like this episode so much. If you've liked my past Opening the Books episodes, you will love this one. And if you haven't liked my past Opening the Books episodes, what are you doing here? Go away. You're not going to like my content. That's just how it's going to be. All right, here we go. Let's get into it. Ben and Kevin. Hello, gentlemen. How are you? Ben, you can start first. It's awkward when the host says, "How are you?" and then nobody knows who should talk first when there's 3 people on a podcast. So Ben, how are you?
All good, man. Doing well. Thank you for having us. You are throwing us for a little bit of a loop. Kevin usually starts us off on podcasts, so I wasn't prepared.
Oh, really?
For that, but we think quickly, so everything's going good, man. You've been an awesome person to pay attention to and enjoyed learning from you and all the stuff you and some of your other peers put out. And so it's really cool to finally be on something like this with you.
Man, yeah, I'm glad to be doing it. The background here, of course, is that the 2 of you came over to my house the other night and we sat and had a drink and smoked cigars and just chatted life and business. And as you guys were walking away, I like strong-armed you into this, I think. I was like, hey, come do Opening the Books. Come do this with me, because you guys were pretty transparent. So I appreciate you doing it. Kevin, you doing well?
Yeah, doing well. Thanks for having us. I was going to say, should we have cigars right now, or I don't know. It might be a little early for that, though.
Cigar hour. Yeah, that's a good idea. That would be a good in-person event to do, essentially like a closed in-person. You get like 20 or 30 people, you do cigars, and the consultation lasts as long as the last cigar is still burning, basically,
Mine might last pretty long because I didn't do a very good job.
We're going to be sitting there for a couple hours with Kev.
yeah, you would go through it. Yeah. Well, yeah, so you guys are in LA. That made it nice and easy because I'm obviously in LA too, so you guys came over and hung out. Talk to people about what Pretty Boy is and who you guys are, maybe a little bit, so people get a sense of the brand. Give me like the quick brand story and what the product or products are, so that people kind of have some sense, and maybe kick people to the website so they know where to go follow along the journey here.
And that's where Kevin usually kicks us off.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm Kevin and co-founder Ben. Quick backstory on us. We're best friends from college, both from Ohio before we moved out to LA, went to Ohio State together. We're kind of the 2 kids that always wanted to, start a business together. Funny enough, Ben grew up, kind of having some bad acne. I didn't have, any skin issues until I got to college. I played football at Ohio State. My freshman year, I started getting pretty severe red breakouts all over my face. Like most founders, have an issue and, how do you solve that? Didn't know how to handle it. Ended up having to go to a dermatologist and was diagnosed with a form of eczema. Fast forward 10 years, Ben and I have both been going to a dermatologist for over 10 years, and COVID hit and I took a class on how to start an e-com business. And Ben and I were roommates at the time, working the same job, which was pretty funny. And we're like, how do we kind of get out of corporate America? What could we start? And, we've always struggled with our skin and didn't really like the products that were, out there for kind of active males who we were as people. There was very scientific brands. There was a ton of brands for women that had many, too many SKUs. There wasn't really a brand that fit us personally. And then also a brand that our dermatologist would back. There's a lot of hypermasculine brands out there, but they wouldn't let him use on our face due to his sensitive skin, my eczema. Like, hey, maybe there's something there. So over 3 years ago or over 4 years ago, we ended up kind of going down this path on how do we start a skincare brand for active males that kind of met the clinical backing that dermatologists and clinical community would back. It took 2 years. We've been live for just over a year and a half now because it took 2 years for development. And we kind of went down this path on how do we create a product for guys? What do guys actually want? And, we did a lot of research, to Ben's credit, on what do men want before we built the brand and before we built the product. And it kind of came down to a couple of things on, one, simplicity, less is more. Guys don't want more than 3 products. Performance obviously has to be high quality, something that the clinical community could back. Our goal is not to just be this kind of $50 million brand. We're trying to go after the big dogs here, be this $1 billion brand, and you have to have the clinical community to back it and quality products. Texture is a huge thing. Guys don't want to make it, something lightweight, something non-greasy. They don't want to make it seem like you're wearing a mask all day. And then a brand that they can align with. We kind of say we're the Nike of skincare, like a lot of brands do, but you think of Nike, it's not a shoe. It's inspirational, aspirational. We really want to create that brand that guys can align with and make skincare a little bit more approachable. So like I said, we've been live for just over a year and a half. It's been a hell of a ride. It's been fun. We're growing really quick. Obviously having some road bumps along the way as any brand, but I think with our approach, with this space that's been growing, a lot of people are diving into men's skincare. The way we're approaching it has been pretty successful. And, part of the reason why we've been able to bootstrap this and really grow and kind of compete with some of the big dogs, winning some awards with just one product.
Amazing. Ben, anything you want to add there?
No, like I said, I think this part we've got pretty down good. So I always agree with everything Kevin says. Later on, we'll probably have kind of different things that we both add to some of those, but nailed it right on the head. Although I am curious, how do you feel? We joked about this at your place. When brands compare themselves to Nike, would love to hear your take after hearing Kevin's description of why we do think it's a very good analogy and goal to set out for us.
You guys didn't do it in the way that annoys me. The way that it annoys me is when people look at Nike creative or something like that and they go like, gosh, like this is why it's so good. They'll do like the like retroactive breakdown on why it's great, or they'll say like, this is the inspiration you should use, or they'll do the really specific tactical thing where it's like, look, Nike would never do that. And it's like, well, okay, so Nike is the biggest brand in the universe or whatever, I don't know how big they are relative to everything, but it's just so silly for small brands to compare themselves at the tactical, practical level. Like their many $1 million shoot and influencer deal is not comparable to your UGC ad, and it shouldn't, and that's okay. Like, so you guys taking inspiration from them and saying like, we want to have the level of impact that goes beyond the product and really build a brand. I think shoot for the moon, go for it. And one of the things that's, I picked up from you guys right away is like, as I say to a lot of people, like I'm actually not wired to go after like gigantic results, which I don't think is necessarily good or bad. I think it's really great that a lot of people have ambition to go do big things in the world. And so you guys clearly have that ambition. And so if you want to go compare yourselves or go think about people and examples that are really, really monstrous, like that's fantastic. Go shoot for the moon. That's great.
Yeah. And I think just one thing to add on to that I know we talked about with you is what, and Kevin touched on this, like there's a lot of brands. One of the things that we were most overwhelmed about when first kind of entering this space is there is definitely a saturation component. Two things that come out of that for us though is one, like competition does foster innovation. So for us, we're both highly competitive people. Kevin was a national championship athlete at Ohio State when he played football there. I was super competitive when I was riding the bench in high school football. We do want to compete. And so that does lead to innovation. And also that when for a saturated market, how we've always looked at this, and this goes into that simplicity piece, is like we're going after the lion's share. And I think Kevin said that, but like we want to be very substantial within our category. And we've talked to you about SKU counts and would love other listeners to give their thoughts. And we've heard other listeners or people you've had on and various kind of things talk about SKU counts. But, our market cap for the 3 categories we intend to play in, if we take 1% of that, we're a $400, $500, $600 million company versus if you're trying to distribute all of that across a bunch of different SKUs, confusing guys in the process. And so, that is for us, we have big goals. And the whole Nike thing for us, why we do think it works is there's so much more than a product. And that's when we lean into that. It's the characteristics Kevin said, quality, performance, prestige, stuff like that.
Yeah. And they didn't get there overnight, right? So like, and I think you guys have a clear sense that like, they started in a narrower category, they added stuff from there. And, the other thing I think about like goals and visions like this is that they're a statement about what's true today. They're not a statement about what you will think is true in 3 years. Your vision may change in 3 years for what you want to become, and that's fine. So right now, though, it gives you a sense of where you're trying to go and how to think about some decisions, and that's what they're useful for. That's fine. So no, I think it's great. Talk about the product a little bit. So, this core product that you guys have right now, single SKU basically. Talk about that, and then talk about what's going from there. I think there is an interesting thing. I've heard this before too, that as gigantic as a category as women's skincare is, men's skincare and personal care is a growing category, and people have noted this for a while, but they've also noted how hard it is. And you said something right away, Kevin, which was like, men don't tend to want to buy as many products. They, I remember when I was at Bamboo Earth, there was a lot of comments from customers that essentially having a multi-product, 5 products from the skincare routine felt like a little personal spa treatment to them. Like it was like a relaxing way to unwind after a hard day, or as part of their morning kind of prep to get the day going. It didn't take that long. It's just that they like going through each thing and smelling each thing and the feeling of going through all that. And that's great. Men don't tend to want to do that. So you guys launched on 1 product and you have a vision for 3, I think you said. So talk about where that is right now and where it's going.
Yeah. So I think I'll give my kind of take on this first, Kevin mentioned this. One of the things for us, again, so a big portion of stuff we'll talk about, I'm sure, is that we're self-funded. So it was all our own money from the beginning. We had saved up to do this. We knew we'd want to start a company. But when it is just your own money, you've only got so many options, and you got to make sure you spend that money well. For us, what our mentality became was, we need to find ways prior to making these big decisions where we can validate in a real market setting as much as we possibly could. And for us, what that meant was, prior to even really getting the development and process, we had some samples kind of going back and forth. We sent out a survey. We got about 300 and I think 20 responses, something like that, from people that were not only within our circle, but we would ask them, and this is, I think this just comes from paying it forward. And we've mentioned this to you. We want to pay this forward, all the help you've given us, that Kevin and I, good relationship guys, we take care of our friends. We're really good friends with a lot of people. Kind of ask them, hey, send this outside your network. We really need to get outside of just our friends. And what we did is we uncovered all the things that Kevin said. So going into that first product, we were super, super, super focused. It was either we could do the typical step, launch a set. That would have meant more money and less quality because we didn't have enough money to make all 3 products really high quality. Or we could and we relied a lot on the Summer Fridays approach, a more female focused brand of, they launched with 1 product, it became viral, and then they expanded from there. So we said, hey, moisturizer is the one that we know, everyone uses a cleanser. Moisturizer's in that adoption growth phase. More and more guys are using it. So if we can nail that product, there's room to grow, but it's also something people are comfortable with. We're going to launch 1 product based on the consumer feedback we got. Kevin already articulated it, but texture, results, simplicity. And once we launch that product, which, has been our hero product, we've been selling it for a year and a half. We've sold 75,000-esque units of it. Then from there, the process now has been kind of just starting to build out the other steps. And like Kevin said, we're very science focused, dermatologist focused. Every dermatologist you talk to, any esthetician is going to say there's 3 things everyone should be doing every day. Hydrate, so moisturize, wash your face, not with the same bar of soap that you wipe your ass with, and then get, a sunscreen the SPF is going to be, most important and provide the most results for longevity. So right now we're in the process. Our cleanser's coming out in June. We took a similar approach. Again, a lot of surveys pre-market, a lot of sending out of samples that we've gotten into customers to validate. Like I said, we want to make sure that when we launch something new, when we do something new, like Kevin and I love to go in every conversation, every customer interaction, every interaction with someone like you as if we are the dumbest in the room. Hopefully we're not always, but because of our lack of experience, we're always trying to learn from our customers, people like you, make the right decision earlier in the process so that we're not spending time correcting things. We'd rather take a conservative approach, be a little slower, very intentional. So now that process has kind of been delivered on that next product, which is the cleanser. And then from there, it's getting to work on that sunscreen.
Yeah. And I think just to and I think you hit the nail on the head there. The way we kind of approached it, and kudos to Ben, a lot of people, and I would recommend this to anyone starting a new business. One, like you said, Andrew, at the end of the day, it's just knowing your customer. Guys are different than women. Skincare is skincare, skin is skin, but guys are different consumers than women. They don't want 10-step products. They don't want all these different SKUs. And that's why, you kept seeing all these different male brands pop up with male branding, but they're 10 different products. And, we see that happen all the time. It's a new industry. It's growing. People are just coming in to try to make money, and they're just pushing a bunch of products. And we're like, all right, that's how we know we have something special. Because we're taking the approach being very intentional on what do guys want. And from the get-go, before we even created the brand, like we did all this surveying and then built the brand around the data, which a lot of people build the brand around what they want and then figure it out later. And I think that's what's been very successful for us, is get all the data first and then build the brand around that. And then like Ben said, less is more is kind of the ethos for us. Guys don't want a lot of products. So, we launched with just one. Yeah, obviously we could have maybe launched with, if we had the funding, the 3 basic products for a routine. But honestly, launching with one has been great. It's a hero product. We're very intentional with that product. Hero products, I think I saw a stat almost 80% of the revenue comes a lot from the hero product for most brands anyway. So if we can nail that, we can get that trust for people to adopt a cleanser. And then SPF's the hardest thing, then they can adopt that. But I think just being very intentional from the beginning for this one product has been really a huge key for our success.
Yeah, it also has a huge advantage for a brand where you are bootstrapped, which is that like the SKU management and demand planning side of things, which I know there's already been some challenges around that. I mean, just imagine how much worse those challenges are the more complexity you add to the product mix. So like there's this beautiful thing about having one core product to launch with, which is that it's going to narrow the band of problems that you have to solve. And so like creative, you don't have to go pick between 50 products and then decide which creative works with 50 different options of products to start with. To say nothing of 300 products or 1,000 products or whatever, right? You start with one product and you have to figure out how to sell that product. And there's just like, there's a limit of how many offers you can run. There's a limit of all of those kinds of things. So I think it's got a secondary advantage to that at the stage you guys started it. Obviously you're hungry entrepreneurs, but you also started as a side business. I know you were working other jobs, so there's limited time. So it's just, there's all kinds of reasons why I think it's a huge advantage to get you guys going and why you guys are actually set up for long-term success really, really well by starting there. On top of the fact that, like you said, the male customer maybe doesn't quite want the level of complexity of adding, a whole giant skincare system or whatever it is, because it's just one thing. They can do it and they can go. So it makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's great. Talk about the journey so far. You guys launched when and how did it go each year so far?
Yeah, so we launched in April of 22. We did like a soft launch in February. So that was our first year in business. Our goal at the beginning of that year was to sell out of our initial MOQ, 10,000 units, which that in and of itself was extremely nerve-wracking to go in with a high MOQ, self-funding, doing it all for the first time.
Yeah, how much money did you guys put out for that 10,000 units, like initially?
So the initial order was 70. Yeah.
So you had to come up with 70 grand to start, basically. Yeah, that's
really. We're either going to make it or we're not. So
so we had the 70 grand paired with, and this is a little side tangent, like to anyone listening who's considering doing something or who is doing this on their own, like you have to have, in our opinion, there's only one way to do it, and it's having 2 people running the ship. It alleviates so much burden. And thankfully, if you're like us, like you guys are very much the same thinkers, but very different skill sets. So why I went into that is we had our 70K, but because Kevin has such a lofty marketing vision and creative vision, we then are spending another 10 to 15K on like high quality commercial style production shoots to the point of Nike of skincare. So that's another, 15K out the door. And so you're sitting there like almost 100K in the hole going, holy smokes, man, this better work. Thankfully it did. I mean, to the point of having a partner like we do, Kevin has led so much of the charge early on of not only teaching him, like he didn't even say this at the beginning of what he typically says in the story. How this started was he went home, took during COVID, went back to Cincinnati, took a class on how to start an e-commerce business, learned a lot from that. It's how we learned about the contract manufacturing process, ads, creative, then went and learned the ad program to start out. So getting started, it's Kevin's in there just tinkering around, not only producing our creative, he has one of the most unique creative minds and ability to put things into a visual perspective while also being responsible for kind of scaling us from literally zero. And, what went really well there is, even though metrics wise, like we weren't crushing, was Kevin does have that ability to hone in on what a good angle is and what a cool way of showing a product would be, how to make people have that FOMO factor early on. Hit our goal of selling the 10,000 units. We did about $187,000 in that first year. Second year was when we started to really figure some things out. We've gone through 3 different agencies at this point, only to bring marketing back in-house because we know our business the best. We've learned a ton. We know how to make those decisions. That second year in business last year, we ended up growing to just a little like a 1 million, 1.1 million, which was like ridiculously exciting for us. And I think that's kind of when we started talking to you the most was, and we'll get into how we actually got there. In October, we had only done about 650,000, I think, through the year. So we were 350,000 off of our goal of $1 million at that point. And we were sinking money. We were losing anywhere from 30 cents to breaking even on every dollar spent on Meta, kind of beating our head in the wall, carrying $10,000 agency retainer fees that are just sinking any cash that we do have. And all of a sudden we were like, listen, we've seen these strategies talked about. We paid a lot of attention to you, Taylor, Dave, people on Ecom Fuel, which is, for anyone listening, is like one of the best platforms of all time, and wanted to try something new. And that's when we implemented kind of the cost cap structure, which from October to December 25th, we closed that $350,000 gap as we were able to just keep like skyrocketing and selling at a high profit, which leads to more cash to go into other things. So the growth journey for us has been ridiculously exciting, but has been all just kind of work of our own hands, getting in touch with the customers, Kevin learning stuff that neither of us have experience on and becoming masters or attempting to become masters of it and kind of growing to that state has been super, super interesting and exciting.
Yeah, that's helpful. So can I pull it up and show people the revenue journey so that people can see that?
Of course.
Let's see. So if you go, so I'll screen share here. Here's your guys' first time versus returning customer revenue since January 2022. You guys did something back in here? Did a little something in February?
Yeah, it was like our soft launch. We had like our samples.
Yeah, right. Cool. And then really didn't start to see traction until you get to July 2022 and then August, and you're starting to move forward. What happened in here? How did you guys get to July and August starting to get, July's your first 8-figure month, it looks like, or not 8-figure, excuse me. Goodness gracious, 5-figure month. First time you got over 10 grand in a month. And in August and September, was that some initial ads hitting?
Yeah, Kev, you want to talk about kind of that time period?
Yeah. So we initially, appreciate nice thoughts or feedback, Ben. Yeah, so that time, and this I think kind of goes into some of the stuff we'll talk about, which is the inventory planning. This was, we were partnered with an agency. We had a few ads that hit. To Ben's credit, to Ben's point, yeah, we did spend probably more than you need to on production early on in a business. I will say we're still using a lot of the content 2 years later, but
I just like obviously about that.
UGC is obviously powerful, and we had a few ads hit of just me as a founder talking, comparison. Obviously, good marketing is really just the function of knowing your customers. There's people that don't have crazy good-looking marketing, but they know their customers, they know how they speak, they know the topics they want to talk about, and we found out some of the biggest brands that our customers were using. They were asking for comparisons. I just did a UGC video comparing us to Keels because that's what our customers asked for. That was the product that they're using the most. And it hit. It really took off. And then, so we kind of had a limp. We weren't doing cost caps at the time though, but the ads were doing well. And then we ran into our first inventory problem because we were scaling too quick with the ad that really took off. It's still an evergreen ad today, but then had to pull back. So that's why you don't see some of the spikes as you do throughout the timeline there.
And I just pulled. Oh, you're about to do it. I was going to say,
yeah,
you can see the ads that are in there, and there's a lot of learnings to take away from that Kevin even just mentioned.
Yeah, you got somewhere, but at the same time, you spent that at a pretty significant loss. So in these days of things, I don't mind. And actually, we'll talk about it with your LTV. This actually probably came out in the wash in terms of the money you spent there and the learnings and all that kind of stuff. But seeing some traction where you're selling something really matters. Like, at this stage of the game that you guys are at, that actually is like, even if you're taking a loss, you're not getting you're within spitting distance of winning there, so.
Can I say one thing about agencies as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ben mentioned, we went through 3 agencies, and you hear this a lot as founders on, the agency horrors. And I think there's obviously a lot of learnings. And just for people out there, if they're going to go in on an agency, like, you don't need to use an agency right away, at least,
I have strong opinions about this, which is that basically if you're under a few $1 million in revenue, under like 2-ish, it's really, really rare that you're going to find the right kind of partner. Like I personally will partner with some people at a lower level because I happen to love that stage of business and working with people from a pretty early stage and all that. But that's even for me, like pretty low end, somewhere around there. What I really think is that people should join Admission from CTC. That's what I really think they should do. And which is the best learning community around learning your way around ads that I'm aware of. They just and there's a link to it in the show notes here, but it's so valuable because there is going to be a bunch of knowledge you can get at that stage of the game that you can then have to unlock or really develop point of view on what great advertising looks like, both financially and creatively, and media buying, actually, all of those core things. And so admission is the best tool for this, in my opinion, because it's rooted in the best principles and is both a mix of like a bunch of learning content that is already given out, plus it is an ongoing community. So you have actual access to continued help, both from other people who are in it, as well as like the team at Common Thread Collective, who in my opinion are like the best thinkers around finance and media buying kind of stuff out there that I know of. So that's what I would tell people to do. And what that does is it saves you from the possibility of burning dollars on agencies, because you can just go around any e-commerce community and you will find horror stories of a bunch of money wasted on agencies where things didn't work out because the people who are servicing you actually didn't know that much or didn't do a great job or whatever. And you just don't know enough to know that. You don't know how to guide them. You don't know how to lead them. So what I always say to people is, if you're going to start a D2C business, paid social is very likely going to be maybe the biggest line item in your business besides COGS itself. Sometimes it's bigger than COGS. And therefore, you ought to go learn your way around it. And in the early stages, you should understand it yourself. You don't have to manage it yourself forever, but you should develop enough principles to know it. So in the early days, I would almost always encourage somebody, go get the best knowledge available. In my opinion, that's the knowledge in admission at CTC. Again, there's a link in the show notes there. And for me, that's where I would send it. So yeah, because otherwise, yeah, the 3 agencies story, I've just heard it a million times. The thing is, at an early stage, agencies can't make any money on you. You don't spend enough. So they're too expensive for you. You're paying too much. They're not going to give you your best talent because you can't pay them enough to get the best talent. It's not the finances of the relationship don't work very well. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And no, 100% agree with everything you were saying. Like, to us, it was, our thought process in the beginning was, hey, they probably know more than us, and then we don't have the knowledge to combat them. Like, you should be running the agency, not them running you. Yeah. And so that's why we went with 3 different agencies. We always started to question, like, hey, like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? Anytime an agency says, like, this is the way to do things, every business is different. There's multiple ways to skin a cat. If they're going to say that right off the bat, move on. There's a million different agencies if you are trying to find one. But it got to the 3rd agency and we were just like, why the hell are we wasting money on this? Like, we know what we're doing. Like, let's stop wasting money and do it our way. And right when we started doing it our way, things took off. And at the end of the day, too, you should try to learn before you even go with an agency.
I don't know. I think there are better and worse ways to do it. And there are plenty of agencies who do things, in my opinion, that are not as good of ways to do it. And so, like, there are multiple ways it's going to get, sort of, but like, there are multiple factors in the success of your ads, I would say. But at the same time, that there are some principles that you should learn and lock in on. And I talk about them a lot. I think Taylor and that crew does. And that's part of what I would say is, like, develop those, then get people who can do a great job executing the best principles very, very well. And then what you said is right, Kevin, which is like, be very involved in the creative process relative to your specific business. I mean, you described this process of spending years or spending, a year or whatever, researching your customer and thinking carefully about why you have only, 1 and eventually 3 products for this customer. That's knowledge that an agency doesn't have. I need that from a client when I'm working with them. They've got to fill me in on that. And I love getting that because then I can think more about how to speak to that person, how to develop creative. And then I can combine that with my best practices around what kinds of creative formatting, how to do great messaging and offers and all that kind of stuff, and media buying and finance, all those things that can all kind of come together. But yeah, that has to be, there has to be some kind of combo of those 2 things. And what a great agency hopefully will at this point, follow a lot of the things that are financially driven media buying principles at the same time. Go ahead, Ben.
And that's what I was going to kind of say is, I think, even though I think we've learned and we're glad that we got to the point where at this stage we think we can manage this on our own and do it well, the learnings that did come out of an agency is a couple fold too, of the topic now that is so trending, and guys like you and the CTC guys and plenty others are talking about this intersectionality of marketing and finance. And that's kind of a direct kind of trickle down effect of where VC money's at and how people are even funding their businesses and needing to make sure that you are profitable, needing to make sure that you have cash moving through the business. What it taught us was, at times, not to say, I'm not even willing to say, or we're not like trying to say these agencies were bad agencies. It was a bad relationship because we didn't know enough about certain business components to give them really, really clear goalposts. So in turn, like Kevin said it perfectly, and this was something we've had to tell each other multiple times. We're like, dude, we can't blame other people for us not knowing certain things and then expecting them to do things. Now, at the same time, he touched on this and I agree, is like, you need an agency that is willing to say, we're here to be a partner. We're here to be a de facto operations, marketing, finance, whatever like kind of arm of your business that you need them to be. And as long as you can communicate your certain business goals clearly and concisely, they need to be open-minded enough to say, I think where I get the most defensive about how I feel about agencies is what Kevin said, where it's like some of them do think that their secret, like they have this secret sauce, and if they're not using it, then you have no chance of success, and don't adapt to maybe the client does have certain learnings, and you need to find a way to bring both schools of thought together to deliver. And we did see that a couple times where our lack of certain operational and financial knowledge paired with, their unwillingness to want to try things differently or kind of appeal to what we thought had worked and replicate what had worked and kind of continue to iterate. That's where there were some tense kind of like more like, okay, we're kind of pissed at agencies. And I think that I've heard some, and I know the CDC guys and you guys do this, where it's like we have to all come together and realize each client is different. There's certain core principles that will transfer directly always, but you do need to look at each client very customized or in a customized sense and say like, okay, we know where you're at. Here's how we're going to put a tailored approach to getting you to where you need to go.
I think almost all of that is at the creative level. So I'll tell you, I think like there are some media buying principles I'm not going to bend on with a client. In fact, if they don't want to do that, they should just fire me. Like I'm not going to bend on cost controls in the ad account. I could imagine going to, cost caps or min ROAS instead of bid caps. That would be a smaller thing. But in general, I'm not going to bend on that. There's going to be some kind of creative where I'm going to say like, I've been planting my flag with clients on the long form explainer, which is something I've talked about a lot. And I'll link a couple episodes about long form explainers that are a reason why I think, or they're an ad format that I think is uniquely powerful and essentially a messaging structure that I think is uniquely powerful. Now where I would, and I would look at your business and I can tell you a couple things from looking at one chart that jump off the page to me that would immediately affect how I'd think about how to consider the strategy of your business and how that would ladder into forecasting and some of those kinds of things. So, and I'll mention it in a second what that is. So those things for me would be non-negotiables. The thing that is negotiable and the thing where I'm going to actually lean on the client is creative. Creative, like not the messaging structure, but the message itself. Like what is it? And this is the key thing. What is it that makes your customer want your product specifically? And how much do you know about that? Some clients actually don't understand that as well as they think they do, but some of them really do. And they can say like, this is the problem that somebody wants to solve. This is the solution for it. This is how our product was designed to do this. I've been around so few e-commerce entrepreneurs who are knowingly selling snake oil. I can't actually think of any. Like all of them have developed their product with care because they care about it and they want to provide something good to the customer. And so somewhere in their process of developing that product, they made a bunch of decisions along the way to have this ingredient and not that ingredient, or have less of this or more of that, to package it in a certain way, to have this amount for whatever reason. And they're thinking about finances and they're thinking about margin, but they're also just thinking about, I really want to care about the customer. Even if they know that there are other products that are good products as well, they want theirs to be good. So my goal with the client is to pull that stuff out of you and to understand what are those things that you did in that year-long process that you just described to me about how you ended up with the product that you ended up with, why you ended up with those things, and then to figure out how to get that into those creative buckets. And I can't do that without you. That's where I have to tailor it to you, So that's what I would say.
I'm curious, like on your, like I'd love to, and you have talked about this kind of ad nauseum, but I have some thoughts. I know we also kind of interacted with someone in Ecom Fuel about this topic and gave kind of some thoughts like, don't spend too much time responding to this, but I am curious, like you said, that cost control for you, that's a non-negotiable. 2 questions. 1, can you explain what your take is on why certain agencies and certain media buyers, especially ones that are not getting paid variable based on spend, this is where I get really tripped out on this. Why are some so resistant? We talked about the math not mathing. Like, why are there so many who are so against this that you've seen? And the follow-up question to that is, why do you think that is so imperative to use cost controls and bid caps or whatever method of saying we're going to ensure profit, we're going to ensure cash? And I have my thoughts on this. We've corresponded about this a little, but I do think that's, by hearing it from you was when we finally, Kevin and I, we had talked about it a bunch. We had both brought it to each other on multiple occasions. And eventually I remember the day we sent the text and we said, dude, F this. We're turning them on today, middle of our agency contract, and that's when things changed. So would love to know kind of why you think other agencies have that thought and why it's so important to you.
Yeah, I should clarify that When I say I would definitely will use cost controls, what I mean by that is relative to the goals and things that are mostly true in businesses that I deal with. So it's very unlikely that I wouldn't use cost controls because I mostly deal with business. There's some, I could imagine some brands where deploying the dollars, probably larger brands with more fixed budgets, where deploying the dollars is actually the most important thing. And, or where they have a different kind of spend than a conversion based spend, where they're going like, yeah, we're just going to allocate $500,000 this year for awareness bidding to stay at the top of
Yeah.
the funnel. We'll measure it afterwards. Besides that scenario, the reason why is because cost controls are the most obviously good solution in advertising in the world. And it is crazy that anybody has a bias to disagree with them. So that's the first point. Like the whole idea, there's a tool where you can spend as much money as possible, driven by an incredibly sophisticated Bayesian probabilistic forecasting system, at or under the target that you need for your business to make money. The idea that that tool exists on the most powerful advertising platform in the world in D2C, and some people go, nah, that's not that good, is crazy to me. It is crazy. It is mind-blowing. It is like, what in the world? Are you kidding me? You're telling me you can keep my dollars in my pocket if it's not going to give me the result I want? If I'm going to lose money? This is like, could you imagine sports gambling if it worked this way? Only bet on the teams that win. Only, we'll only spend your money if we're really confident that that prop bet on how many Travis Kelce touchdowns you're going to get is going to come through. Like that, what would you do? You'd take all of your money to Vegas immediately and just go put it on that. That's what you would go do. And so as a baseline, when you basically describe the tool that way, it's banana nuts to me that anybody doesn't immediately go, my bias at least needs to be in favor of it, at least as a starting point. Now, here's the reason why I think some people don't like it, which is that they find that it doesn't work that easily a lot of times. They find that it sounds good in theory. My friend Jess Bachman gave, I think, the best one-line summary of the disagreement or the frustration people have with this, which is, sure, Andrew, that's what it says on the can. By which he means essentially, right, like that's great if it works, but it actually doesn't work that well. I think that's wrong. I think it takes some learning for how to implement the system well. And there are some places where you can get tripped up based on not understanding your AOV, not understanding attribution settings.
Paybacks and
right. There's a lot of ways where you can get tripped up on this, and I understand that. And there is a reality where, like, even if you don't have a percentage of spend deal as an agency, it doesn't look good to a client if your spend goes down a bunch. A lot of times, they're paying you because they want to grow their business. So if you're spending $100,000 a month and then you go to cost caps and it goes to 70 grand or something like that, but it comes out more efficient, the client actually isn't that happy with that right away, even if they're paying you a fixed cost.
But again, I'd go back to what you said about banana nuts. Why? Like that, I just gave this example to someone. Weirdly enough, a guy called the other day he wanted to kind of earn our business as an agency. I was like, listen, dude, he's new at it. And I was like, we're not doing another agency. I'm not going to set up a call with my co-founder. Yeah. Thank you for your time. But let me give you this thought, which to your point is like, if you could tell me that I could spend, like, I would rather earn $100,000 in revenue. If let's say we did 200 grand at a $20,000 loss, I would rather earn $100,000 in revenue at a $10,000 profit, $15,000 profit. So to your point about banana nuts, this is where I've seen this and why I wanted to bring this back up, just to give more chance for people to hear from your perspective and also our perspective. And we engaged about this on Twitter one day, which is like, if you have modeled out the value of awareness and you're so sophisticated that you can say, I know definitively that this awareness is going to lead to a wicked high LTV. We're going to make the money back. I'm so confident and we have extra cash. Let's burn it and just go, through a new customer acquisition phase. Totally makes sense. But for a lot of people who this strategy matters the most to are people who do need to find ways to improve the operational and financial efficiency of the business. And it's like you said, there's a tool exists that says, I only want to take home customers who are going to do this for me. Maybe it's a slower growth, but even you see when we can pull up the charts, when we implemented and Kevin put in the strategy, you said how to get there, and Kevin can talk about what we did, which was like kind of a higher first cost cap, and he can give more of the details of lowering down. Like, our sales went through the flipping roof, like insane growth. And I just don't understand the resistance at times.
Yeah, I'll say the other thing I think is happening here is that people just don't like giving up control, and people generally don't understand the concept of probabilistic forecasting. And so I think there's a more natural thing in that respect that people kind of go, it feels like giving up control is hard to do. And I don't think there's anything nefarious about that. I don't think it's because people are like, oh man, if somebody finds out that we don't have to push the buttons anymore, they're going to fire us. Like, I run all my clients like this way. Nobody wants to fire me because of that. It's not really what you're paying for anyway. So I just think that's the other aspect of this, is that it's sort of scary. It just feels like I'm giving up control to this thing that I don't, especially if you've never done it really, you don't really understand it that well. It just requires getting a win and seeing it really work. And then typically people are more willing to go in. But can we actually jump into that story a little bit more? And because I think that will help move us towards some really interesting conversation about kind of where the business is at right now. So to pull this chart back up again, right, you see this April bump. I was looking at your spend here. This looked pretty good pre-cost controls. Can you guys talk about what happened in April of 2023? You did 45 grand in new customer revenue. And if I pull up the spend from that time, please hold, I will do that right now. You only spent, this is actually really good. You only spent 24 grand to do it and generated 33 grand on a 28-day click basis. So what happened? What happened in here?
So I think I actually misspoke earlier. The first bump was a UGC that I created just on a founder story, and that was just us kind of managing the ad account. This one was with I believe our second agency, and that's when the Keels ad, the comparison ad, really took off. We had a little bit more knowledge with the second agency of like, hey, this is kind of where we want our margins at, and then that's when we didn't really have the forecast built out yet. That took off like crazy, and then we had to pull back. So it was the second UGC ad done by me that kind of took off right there and did pretty well.
And this, what I'll say is, if there's a single, this is the agency that we owe them. And these were, I feel comfortable saying their name because I think they're actually a really good group, is Pilot House. Yeah. Pilot House, they were working out of, or kind of under the, what's his newsletter? Eric Dick has a DTC newsletter. It's their holding company. To Kevin's point, this was where we were just finally starting to get really deep into the financials, but we were learning, so it was going slower. These guys were actually approaching creative testing in a way that aligned with Kevin's vision and was kind of reflective of what we wanted, testing a lot of angles, hooks, different imagery, static, colors, all the things that you talk about when you talk about iterating. Unfortunately, that's when we hit the inventory piece, and so we had to scrap them at that time. And we did a month or two later go, damn, those guys were actually really kind of getting closer, and I think we were the problem there of not knowing certain of those bumpers to give them. But it was that pairing of Kevin making that comparison ad. These guys were definitely kind of approaching it more in a holistic testing structure. But yeah, still, again, not using cost caps, but interesting to see or think about what could have happened if we were cutting quicker and only focusing on certain metrics, what it could have done for us.
Well, because to that point too, and kind of to our earlier conversation on cost caps, obviously, for every business, we think it'd be great, but even for a startup that's bootstrapped, that doesn't have money. So that second agency, I think anyone on either side of the aisle or however you're doing strategy, content is the name of the game. You have to, it's volume. You got to test effectively. For cost caps, for if you're not running cost caps, just so you can hit the margins that you want. But they were doing that, which was great. Obviously, it probably could have been better if we instilled, caps to that. So that was the one thing is that I would, obviously agree with. We didn't for testing, which people don't understand when they're getting into Facebook ads, testing costs money too. And as a bootstrap company, you can't just keep wasting it at the volume you probably need to scale and find a winning ad. You might not have the budget to actually consistently test at the volume needed.
So yeah, I mean, this is where I agree that creative is the goal, which is part of the reason why I'm so pro cost controls, because exactly what you said is right, Kevin. If you spend a bunch of money testing ads, that's a cost center in your business. I just recorded an episode about this, explaining this basic concept and I'll link that in the show notes as well, because if you are spending dollars on tests that don't work, that is a real cost center, maybe a huge one in your business, actually. And so, so I think there's a clear thing here where instead you want to be able to surface as much new creative as possible. You're at this stage where you have to find what is going to win. And in order to do that, you have to test. And again, if you launch your tests in a setting where it's cost controlled, so you're not actually spending unless the machine thinks that it can hit your target, then it's going to suppress your testing dollars. It's going to suppress the losing testing dollars and amplify your winners. So, because when I see what happened here, you go to April, and then in May, immediately after you've got these ads that are kind of working, something starts to fall off here. Now, this is partly you guys ran out of inventory, right?
Yeah. We just had to taper back drastically on acquisition.
Yeah, and I see like a bunch of different creative kind of moving around here, some of it kind of going up and down, etc. The place that it gets really interesting to me is when you actually to make the kind of the full switch. So if you go to October here, and if we look, you can see this really, really clearly in your revenue, right? So October, you're at 18 grand in new customer revenue, 49 in returning customer revenue. November, you go 45. December, you go 86. January, you go 87 first time customer revenue. So this is like a massive unlock. Now you're doubling that like nice bump you had in April back here in January. Not too surprising that January is a good month for you. We can talk about February in a little bit too, which is when we're recording this. But you guys start to see that unlock happen a little bit more, where now the creative is being mixed with better testing, etc. You can see there's partial cost caps, partial not in October. And then in November, you guys push in and get a little bit further. So you spent 20 grand in October, 43 in November. Now this is one thing I'll say is you've got like your setup here is your attribution setting is 7-day click or 1-day view, at least at first. I would say let's get those view conversions out of there, but you spend increase. So on a 28-day click basis, you're actually at about 35 grand. And so this looks like, okay, a scaling up spend. The return isn't necessarily great yet. Let's just look at it at an MER level. You're at 42 grand in November with 45 in first-time customer revenue. So about a 1-to-1 AMER. Talk about what happened there. It sounds like you guys were willing to let it run a little bit aggressive.
Yeah. So, and this is where like Kevin had this good idea of basically, so like I said, we got to a point, and what happened was I more so work on kind of our operational side and finance side. And I'm looking at this and going, we straight up we cannot sustain doing this. Like the bills are going to pile up and we don't have enough money to keep doing this one.
In October?
This was in middle of November when we made the switch.
Oh, okay.
So October.
So you started scaling up at 1-to-1 because you were under the impression that financially you can and should, but then Ben, you threw a flag on that and said we can't do that.
We couldn't be at a point where even though we were getting closer to 1-to-1 and seeing some improvement, we have to make money. Like we're at a point now where we have to make money. We had big bills coming up, have to make money. And so that was when we said, kind of middle of our last month with our previous agency, who are, again, rock solid dudes, brilliant. They've spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars on media buying. Don't discredit them at all. For our business, we had to start taking on more money. And that's where we kind of said, we're going to do this. Kevin had read something somewhere or just came up with the idea, I forget, of like, let's start at putting the cost cap at basically,
higher.
30, 40.
It was your episode, actually. It was the one with Cody
Plofner,
I believe. Yeah, where he talks about just
I'll link that too.
Yeah, changing the spic or the pacing mechanism.
So It was like, let's set a higher cap, and we set that higher cap. Let those ads kind of transferred in that ad set, start seeing, okay, can the ads still spend? Can we get any acquisitions here? And then what it was is every single day we would go in there and we'd see, all right, we're still getting acquisitions. We would start it going down by like from 50. I think our first cost cap was like 50, went down to like 45. Then a couple days later down to 40. Then a couple days later down to 35. And then all of a sudden, like our target cost cap goal, our break even ROAS is like a 1.8. Our first order profitable is like a 2.1, 2.2. So those caps are respectively somewhere in like at profit, like $18 at break even around 2021. And so we knew that was our goal. And what we did is it was that episode with Cody and all the stuff we've learned where we just set it high, started pulling it down. And every day we'd pull it down, we'd raise that budget a little. And so as you can see, like by the time this really ramped up, like if you go to that the week of December 17th or the week of December 24th after we've gone through this process.
Let me pause here really fast, Ben. This is really fascinating actually on its own because these somehow all got deleted. But like your highest spending ad here is just highest volume, no CPO, no cost cap is the biz strategy. So you spent the most money at a 0.59 28-day click. So what you should have probably done right is like just had it all at these cost cap where actually the return is a little bit better on all these cost cap campaigns. It looks like this is a mistake. And then yeah, things started to kind of come around. What I'm also curious about is if we can see the creative, was it the same creative that was winning along the way there? Let me see. It looks like some stuff got deleted. Let's see if we can actually get to it. Yeah, we can. Cool. So yeah, okay. So you have a bunch of different stuff all spending in here, which is super interesting too. So you got the posted ad. I'm a fan. Barry Hot's coming on the podcast tomorrow.
We did actually put in one of the Keels comparison ad that I talked about. That was an evergreen ad, and it's funny as those ads like we've kind of turned on and off like when we weren't running cost caps and it would build back up. So it was a great ad, but now putting it in the cost cap format, it obviously started to spend because Facebook has liked it for the past year, but it was doing it profitably. which was
Yeah.
huge for us.
So then you get to December, and this is where the real unlock happens, though, right? Is December, you get to 51,000 in spend, 72 grand, 28-day click revenue, which is now you're talking about, you're probably close to break even net of COGS there, right? On first purchase at a 1.4. I bet you're not quite there, but you're probably close.
Yeah, no, we were getting close. And again, what is good there is that
86 grand in the ad account. Sorry, I'm gonna switch over really fast. So now you're at 86 grand in first time revenue plus some returning customer revenue as well, still coming through. You had, I assume a Black Friday sale push your returning customer revenue up in November. Yeah, and then back to back December, January, you got there. So go ahead, Ben, talk about what was happening.
Yeah, no. So it was just that yes, it was close to breaking even on COGS there. But what it was is, and this is what is so important, and we're learning now so fast, is it's kind of that whole classic conversation. So for us, like, we pay 100% on delivery. COGS is, in theory, wiped out the first month you pay the bill. Like, now you're just earning back money. So when it pertains to like cash flow, each of as we're getting more and more profitable here, that's just money that's coming straight into the bank. So whereas, yes, we are still compensating for COGS that have already been spent, and on a P&L basis, you need to look at it that way in terms of, and this is where people talk about this all the time, like, it's so crazy how often profit doesn't equal cash. For us, profit started equaling cash flow here, and we started seeing the bank account. Like, we always, for the past year, all of 2023, we hovered around 30 grand in our bank account. And then all of a sudden, by the end of December, we're up at 150 grand in the bank account because all of that cash is actually coming in. The cost of the product's already been paid on a P&L. We still have to reconcile it. But for us as a business, the name of the game at the revenue levels we're at is like, you have to keep cash moving. And what that did is it opens up so many more doors, which we can get into now, which is like the February taper off, because yet again, we're in an inventory and we can talk about our supply chain problems and all of how we're working through that. But what it did was give us more cash that if we had had inventory, we could have bumped those budgets up. I think the highest day of budgets we had in December, I think the highest budget level we set was like 5K. It was typically spending about 4 of that at the cost cap levels. Yeah. We started dropping caps at times. We've dropped caps down to $18 at times just because we're like, you've said this. If I can't sell a product, then any product I do sell, I just want to take home the most margin on it as possible.
That's
and that was kind of like what we implemented.
If you're going to run into inventory limitations, get the most amount of money you can make per thing you can sell.
And right now we're
don't go burn through it.
Yeah. Right now we're sitting on 360 grand of inventory that you've seen. We were spending, our budget was $5,000 a day. Just for February, we're at $200 a day, but still the same structure. And what's happening is that we're going to take home realistically probably about 300 grand of that 360 retail that we have, which means that from a cash flow basis, we're going to be sitting pretty by the time the new inventory comes in, be able to pay some of those bills out of operational cash versus having to go. Like, Kevin and I reached a point where he said, we'll put everything we have. We'd sell our house for the business, but we're not going to just keep dumping money in when something's not changing. And it's really nice to get to that point now.
The big thing you have here, right, is like this January is really awesome. And you probably missed a moment a little bit, right? Because January is going to probably be a particularly good moment in this category, is my guess. But that's okay. I mean,
we were forecasting 350 to 400 in January, but because of the inventory. No.
Yeah. I mean, so you guys did 87 in first-time customer revenue and 39 in returning customer revenue. And you go.
But we dropped our spend on like January 7th.
35. Yeah. So you're running, at a 2-to-1, 28-day click. Like, that's really, really good. And then if we go to this month, just to catch it up, right now you're running a 2.3 20-day click. Part of that is because you're harvesting the value from the clicks that you drove in January, right? Because it's 28-day click. So it's reporting the revenue on today. So that number will always look bigger the further away you get from bigger spends. But yeah, that's awesome. And it looks like, cost cap the same thing. You got to keep it lower because you're running this inventory thing. So I think it's a really good case study in this. It's, it's one of the things that's happening here really clearly. If we go back to January is, you've got, let's see, one ad is smashing, this eczema ad, 17 grand in spend at a 2-to-1. You've got another couple of ads doing pretty well as well in here. I don't know where the caps were set, but maybe they're running a little bit higher. Again, in December, that same thing is happening. A couple of ads kind of rising to the top of your spend. This is so normal when you're running caps. Like, one of the things people, I think, don't anticipate is how much the spend will go towards your best performing ads and how good that can be, especially when you hit those big unlock moments where you launch a new ad that works a lot better than your old ads. Like, if it's like, you can get really big wins in the earlier stages of your paid social spend, right? And so you'll launch a new ad, it starts crushing, and all of the dollars go towards that because it's just clearly your best performer. And so that can actually do this thing. Everybody's worried that their spend is going to constrict when they run caps, but actually you guys do the opposite thing, right? Your spend actually went up. It went up to 51 grand. Your return went up as well as all the money funneled towards the best performing ads. Now your total efficiency gets better because you're spending less money on your worst ads and more money on your best ads, which means the average is going to come out higher. And at the same time, then it's also pushing towards your best performing ads. And now you guys are in this spot where there's inventory concerns. So yeah, really helpful kind of look at how this all played out for you guys. I'm really curious. Did you ever relaunch that ad that worked in April of last year, Kevin? Let's see.
It's in the. Do you want to know where?
And it's just not getting as much spend anymore.
Yeah, not as much. I mean, so obviously we moved it to a CBO campaign where it's falling to the top ads, but it's the Keels one. Where is it down? Keels, UGC Keels comparison comp.
Right here. Yeah, see,
it's
this is awesome. This is great though, because what it is doing is exactly what you want the caps to do and the CBO to do, which is it still runs it, but it runs it at the relative volume relative to your other performance that Meta thinks will work best. So you're getting much, much more scale now at your best performing ads because of it. So
something for the listeners too that we were skeptical about for just starting caps in general. So one of our ads in there was just me with like a pinned comment talking about eczema. Before we had a couple ads that were really hitting, really running well. And, we thought just with caps, all right, like these ads now are just going to no other ad we drop in there is going to be able to spend money because these ads are just going to take all of the budget. Like that was something that we've obviously read on people against caps, something that we just didn't think would happen. But we popped in a new ad. Like if you keep testing creative, no matter how well an ad is that's crushing under cost caps in your current campaign, if it's a good ad, it will get fed money. And we saw that with this one ad in there. And now it's like our top 3 of ads and gets a ton of spend. And so just like, I know a lot of people are wary of just like, well, you can't test that volume. Like it's not going to spend money. You say it all the time. If it's a good ad, it's going to get money.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And let's just beat into the ground the concept that and you've been so enlightening for us of we're talking about us all being humans. Some of us are better than others at this, you being one of them, these guys being one of them. You guys are great media buyers. Dude, this is like if you pay attention to what's going on in machine learning and large language models and stuff like that and what Facebook is doing, trust this process. This algorithm, their whole business is to make money. They want you to spend money. They're going to feed things that make you spend money. This whole concept that, yes, there's certain little twerks you can make or you can tinker with the account.
I don't think they're twerks. I don't think you're supposed to twerk.
Not twerk. No, definitely don't twerk. You can tinker around in the account, but this algorithm is built to make this decision. And by trusting it, to Kevin's point, let it test, throw it in there. And we've been doing that and they still get spend. They take spend away from the winners if it's going to be a better ad. And it's just been really cool to watch.
Yeah. Once you get doing it, it's just so great because what ends up happening is that you remove a lot of the anxiety of the testing that goes in there. And instead, this thing that does it better than you anyway is great. And you hit something which is really right there, which is that the bar that it has to clear is your brain. The bar that the machine learning has to clear is your brain. There is no choice of get it right all the time versus get it right some of the time with the machine learning. Because I don't think the machine learning is perfect. I'm sure it misses sometimes. It's probabilistic forecasting. So it's working off of probabilities, which means sometimes a 10% chance of things will happen that wins. The famous example of this is 538 predicting the Trump-Hillary Clinton election. And, they said 70% of the time or whatever it was, Hillary Clinton wins. And everybody got so mad at them when Trump won because, oh my gosh, you couldn't, you guys got the prediction wrong. And what Nate Silver would say afterwards, right, was well, we said Trump would win 30% of the time. That's actually a lot. And probabilistic forecasting works that way. So it will miss sometimes. But here's the key thing. It will do that consistently much better than my brain and much better than anybody else's brain on this call and any human brain out there. And so that's the key. That's the bar that it has to clear. Pretty Boy, the brand that I'm talking to in this episode of the Interference Podcast, is exactly the kind of brand that from a very early stage of business, the stage that they are in right now, ought to be considering as they scale their team working with my sponsor for this show, More Staffing. More Staffing, as you've probably heard me discuss, is a recruiting agency to help you staff D2C businesses in the Philippines. And the value proposition is really clear and really straightforward. It's this. You can find incredible talent, people with deep e-commerce resumes, highly skilled professionals at manager, director, even executive levels of your business across everything in your D2C business. That's like supply chain, ops, inventory, management, and forecasting, customer service, marketing, video editors, graphic designers, all of those elements of your e-commerce business. You find incredible talent, people who really know what they're doing in the Philippines. You will pay them top dollar in the Philippines, but a much lower amount than you would pay them in the US. That creates a win-win where you are going to attract incredible talent, pay them a great wage for the Philippines, and at the same time, grow your business while maintaining a low SG&A, low OPEX as a percentage of your revenue, and have incredible talent while you do it. There is, to me, no reason why e-commerce businesses don't develop this skill early. And if you are in a stage, if you're farther along in your e-commerce business than where Pretty Boy is at right now in this episode as I'm talking to them, then you probably can find a space for this talent as well. But especially if you are following along and you're at an earlier stage in the journey, like Pretty Boy is, then you're seeing success and traction, you're starting to grow, you should develop the skill of outsourcing and integrating outsourced talent from an early stage of your business. Having that skill will matter a lot as you keep scaling, because that will then make it that you get really good at finding any friction points in the process of integrating overseas talent into your business. There are some, but they are not what you often think they are. You can solve time zone. Filipino employees are often, usually, in my experience, all of the ones on my team, very, very good English speakers. There is not an issue there if you're worried about the language gap. And they are hardworking, high integrity, highly talented people who you will love working with. So if you want to integrate incredible overseas talent to your e-commerce business from the Philippines, you ought to do it, and you ought to do it with the help of my friends at More Staffing. Go to morenow.co/AF. morenow.co/AF. There's a link in the show notes. morenow.co/AF to get started with them. They will do all of the legwork of helping you identify, recruit, train, onboard, coach. They do 6 months of coaching with talent they hire into your business. They will make it really easy for you. They will do it at a great price. They'll even give you a 1-year guarantee. So the talent you had doesn't work out, then you can replace them at no additional cost. So go to morenow.co/AF. I love More Staffing. We have re-upped again a sponsorship together, a partnership together, because they're a great partner to me in this business. You should work with them. Go do it now. Okay, I don't want to belabor that actually anymore. I want to talk about two things in the ad account really fast.
Can I just ask one question about the ad account as you go into this? You talk a lot about 28-day click and laddering, and I know myself, it's a certain piece that I don't fully understand. Kevin, if you do, then tell me to shut up. Could you just kind of explain, like, looking at those different metrics, how you utilize them, and that whole concept? You've mentioned this before. I literally don't know what it means, of like laddering to a 28-day click.
Yeah, I need to put out a piece of content on this. How about this? I'm going to create a separate piece of content that is just about this deal, or that is just about this concept, because I don't want to get too distracted by it here. But basically the idea is that you have to make a decision. I'm going to make that note to myself right now. And I'll make it shorter because it's fairly simple. But the basic idea is this: if you are in this ad account, right, you have to make a decision about what is going to happen on a small time window, even though you know that some people are going to purchase over a longer time window. Okay, the basic idea is some people are going to wait 3 weeks to buy after they click today, or they're going to wait 5 days to buy after they click today. Okay, and so you have the opportunity in the ad account to set your attribution model and your optimization model to either 1-day click or 7-day click, and then you can include view attribution in there or not. So I have to make the decision today with the knowledge that the full value of my spend will not be realized until later. Okay, that's the simple idea. And everybody recognizes this. Everybody has experienced this themselves, right? You think about buying something, maybe you click on an ad, and then 2 weeks later, maybe you get paid, and that makes you feel a little bit better about making the purchase. And so then after you make that purchase, or after you think about it, then you go, okay, I'm going to make the purchase today. Well, in your ad account, right, you've got your attribution setting here to 7-day click. But what about the person who clicks today and buys in 8 days? They are not going to show up in the window that you have selected here, which means this time window, this 7-day click time window, we'll talk about view in a second. It's actually one of the things I wanted to ask about. The people in this 7-day click time window, you have to have some idea that there will be an increase in their value over that later period of time. And what Meta allows you to do, and I'll just show you in my dashboard here, if you go to compare attribution settings and you just pop in this 28-day click, now I can compare revenue on 28-day click versus revenue on whatever you have selected as your attribution setting. So what this is going to give me right here is the 7-day click plus 1-day view revenue value of these ads. Okay. And it's going to report it on the day of the purchase, not the day of the click. So if I clicked 3 weeks ago and purchased today, it's going to report that revenue today. For people who've been around the meta ads game for a long time, they know that's switched. Before iOS 14.5, it reported on the day of the click, which was actually much easier to work with. So what do we make of that when I know some people are going to click and then buy later? Okay. Well, what you can do is you can compare your attribution settings and do this like this and actually see what this journey looks like on a click basis. So on day one, you get 10 grand. So within 1 day of clicking, somebody buys, or within 1 day of clicking on your ad, they buy. That's 10 grand there. Within 7 days, there's another $1,000 there, see, off the click, right? So that's a 10% increase. That really matters. So if you were buying on 1 day click, you would need to factor in that 10% increase. But there's another $1,000 on 28-day click right here. And so now I have to figure out how much, where I should set my cost cap, what my target should be today based on the fact that there's going to be an increase over more time. Okay. So actually the thing I wanted to get at with that's the basic concept. I'm going to put out some additional content walking through how to find that in a specific ad account and how to go determine that. But the thing I wanted to point out for you guys is, or ask the question is there a strategic decision or reason why you are bidding 7-day click over 1 day click, first of all? And secondly, why you have view conversions in there? Is there any particular reason for those two things?
No, there isn't, honestly. I mean,
yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's just how it's been set up by various agency partners. And again, Kevin mentioned it, where if you're not experts, you lean on who the expert's supposed to be. So
yeah. No worries. And this is the setting that Meta will default you into also. So that's pretty normal to see that.
So you though would say to change that down to 7-day only.
Yeah, I would say a simple place to start here would be 7-day click only, and then always have in your column set 28-day click as well. And the reason why here is, like, if you just look, right, this is reporting $4,000 worth of view conversions on a 7-day click window that are not in, well, $3,500 that are not in, or $3,500 worth of view conversions that are not in this 7-day click setting. And I would say those view conversions are probably not real. Well, they're real conversions, but that your ads didn't necessarily drive those, or at least these ads didn't necessarily drive those. They should probably be attributed somewhere else in your acquisition flow, maybe to previous ads or something like that. But that's the way I would think about it. So I believe that there are some view conversions, to be clear. Like, it's not that everybody clicks right before they buy, but that probably this is significantly overstating it. And the baseline way that I would measure my ads is either on a 1-day click or 7-day click basis. And I would make that decision based on the actual shopping experience of my customer. So, like, is there a long consideration cycle on this product? It's not a very high AOV product, right? Your AOV, I put it in my ad account, is $45. Okay. So it's not a very high AOV product. So my guess is they don't need to think for a long time. Like, you think, I've run ads for like expensive furniture companies, the AOV is like $3,000. That's a long consideration cycle. Most people don't just pull out their wallet and drop $3,000 on something within 1 day of clicking. Okay. They're going to talk to their spouse, or they're going to, even get a sample, to color it and look in their house, all that kind of stuff. In this case, $45, you probably don't have to think that hard about it in terms of wanting to try it out. So I might move this to 1-day click at some point as well. And I've sometimes seen that really help brands. But in both cases, you always need to have 28-day click revenue in your dashboard so you can reference the total value. So, like, let's actually look at this on a larger spend and go last month. Okay. So last month, you've got 1-day click revenue of $62,000, 7-day click of $68,000, 28-day of, $69,000. So a pretty small gap from 7-day to 28-day. That's not too surprising. And in fact, if we take this on a larger sample, we can just go maximum, look at all your spend ever, and we can see 389, 1-day click, 433, 458. This is not going to add these columns together for your default settings because there's multiple attributions in there, so Facebook can't add them. But yeah, you look at these legacy campaigns that are turned off, so you're outside of any 28-day click windows, 66, 74, 81. That gives you some sense of the way people are making decisions, and this is pretty normal. Most of the purchase behavior happens in those 7 days. So if you don't have a clear decision about this in your mind, sticking with 7-day click can work well because that's going to capture most of the value you see. But then always just reference 28-day click and notice that spend is real, and that's money that you are actually getting from your customers. So yeah, I would just look at those and then work off of those as the baseline for how to set your targets, etc.
Yeah, it'd be cool when you do the follow-up piece of content too. I think where then this becomes interesting is just we've downloaded some of your other resources, like anything that could be put into like a model of like, this is how you should look at setting it because this is how you model it out. I think that'd be helpful for us and for anyone else listening.
Yeah, I have let me pull up my unit economics calculator here because I do have a way of doing this. And actually it's one of the resources that's in my email capture. Again, if you follow up here, I'll make sure this is in the email with links. What I'll do here is I'll probably send people to for all the links that we've referenced here and for all the resources, they will all be in a follow-up where you just give me your email address on this page. I'm not going to spam you. I promise. I don't even have a newsletter or anything. I don't even totally know why I collect your email address, to be honest with you. People tell me I should, I guess. So I do. But yeah, just check the show notes here. You'll see where to go to do that. And in the email that you get from there, in the automated email that you get for that, I'll include this unit economics sheet so that you can see it. But let me see if I can pull one up really fast.
Because I think that's like, while you're pulling that up, one of the things that, again, goes back to, we've talked about this a lot amongst ourselves, like now that we're making more money, now that there's cash coming, like then you can start optimizing. And like, I have some thoughts on this about how it pertains to supply chain, but like now we can actually, instead of just going, damn, we just need to get people to buy and convert and we're losing 30 cents on every dollar. Now you can go, okay, we're okay. It's working. Let's optimize. Let's refine. Like, let's get more scientific with it. You don't have that luxury when you're living business paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. Well, so I agree. So let's talk about this a little bit. So this is actually what I would build all this off of. And it's probably something we should do together, right? If I was you, I would start with my $45 ad AOV, something like that, include all of this and maybe include taxes, which is not in here as well. But this is going to say all the costs associated with selling a product to a customer, right? Cost of goods, merchant fees, that's the 3% the credit card company is going to take, plus Shopify fees, whatever. Not fixed costs, but like per order costs, customer returns, whatever your return rate is, you pop that in there. Shipping costs, fulfillment costs, if you're working through a 3PL, those are two separate things. What you're actually paying to ship the product versus the fulfillment costs. And those are all in there. And let's just say, like, I don't know what your guys' margin is, but let's say it was there. The delayed purchase multiplier in here is going to give you in this document a 28-day click revenue over 1-day click revenue. So it's exactly what we just talked about looking at here in your ad account. So you can see, it would be like, in this case, if you're optimizing for 7-day click, then you would look at 28-day click divided by 7-day click. And that would be the multiplier, the purchase multiplier here. Or if you're doing it off of 1-day click, you would do it like this. So let's take an ad account that's shut down, or let's take a campaign that's shut off so that we've got the full realization of the 28-day click window in there. And we'll say for that Q legacy one, that's the third one down there, 0.95 over 0.77. So if you're running 1-day click, you'd expect a 23% delayed purchase multiplier, right? So it's just 0.95 over 0.77. And that is going to be the expected increase from 1-day click to 28-day click. Now, if you're bidding 7-day click, then we don't want to go 0.95 over 0.77. We want to go 0.95 over 0.87, which is right here. Okay. And now it's a 9% increase. And so you just want to factor that in so that when you go, I don't even need to go make this other piece of content now. This is exactly what I was going to talk through, right? And now when you factor that in, you would say, okay, let's say we're bidding 7-day click. Well, let's go ahead and say we're doing 1-day click. Let's go 23%. That should be close enough. And what that means is now, if you want to have a break-even target of 1.77.
Can you go back? Can you share the Excel?
Sorry, I thought I was. Sorry. Yeah, I forgot to click over. So let's put the 23% delayed purchase multiplier here that we just saw. Let's just say we're bidding 1-day click. We saw an increase of 23%. So essentially, if somebody sends $1 today, by day 28, they're going to spend another 23 cents. Excuse me, that's the wrong way of saying it. Additional customers will spend additional 23 cents because this is targeting first purchase, not LTV. This is not about the LTV of the customer. It's just consideration cycle is what it's getting. So it's delayed purchases, that idea. Okay. So now the first purchase, let's say for this theoretical brand, let's say, okay, $45 AOV, let's just do it real fast. How much is your guys' blended margin, net of shipping, net of everything?
Yeah. Do you want each line item or do you just want gross margin?
Let's do it. Cost of goods. What's cost of goods, including packaging and everything?
Yeah. So cost of goods, 618.
Okay.
Merchant fees,
2.9 probably, right? That's normal.
Like we're at like 1.94, $1.94 if you're putting in that input
well, it should be a percentage plus 30 cents for
Shopify
Shopify.
about 2.9.
Okay, that's pretty normal if you're not on Shopify Plus. Yeah. If you're Shopify Plus, it goes down.
Returns 1%.
Okay. This can really matter for some brands, by the way. If you're an apparel brand listening to this, go check this number and factor it into your COGS. Like I've seen upward 20% for swimsuit brands. I've seen like 40%. It can get crazy. So yeah. Shipping costs, like average cost to ship it to a customer. Forget fulfillment costs for a second.
As a percent, about 15%, or as a dollar figure, about $5.50.
Okay, cool. And then fulfillment costs per unit?
It's looped into the $5.50, so 0.
Cool. Great. So your margin is roughly 70% landed to the customer.
Yep.
Great. Cool. So here is the thing that is great. Okay, so awesome. So you're at a 1.44. what this calculator is going to spit out is what your break-even margin is here. Okay, so at a 1.44, your ROAS is where you need it to be break even on first purchase. And now I've got these 20% below and above just so you can visualize it if you want to. And then here's what your CAC target is. At that point, you get $0 in first purchase CM. Now, what we haven't talked about is LTV, and I want to come back to this in a second. So don't worry about this column J yet in this. But that means that if you have a 23% delayed purchase multiplier and you bid one day click, okay, then you actually need a $38 CAC or a $1 or a 1.17 one day click ROAS to ladder to, and that's what I always use that phrase for, to a 1.44. So yeah, I don't even need to separate this piece of content. Maybe I'll make this my separate piece of content as well. Just cut it out separately.
And so basically then tactically to use this, how you'd look at it is you could actually look at this, especially whether you're on net invoicing with Facebook or you're paying, like we're still paying just for credit card benefits of paying just, you know,
course,
as you hit
get
the
dynamics, baby.
Yeah. So then you would look at this and you could basically say, if my budget's actually $1,000 a month, you could raise that budget in theory to $1,300 a month because you know that you're getting, like, that's the way you would apply this?
No, the way I would apply this is I would set if I'm bidding for a one day click optimization, which I probably would do if I was you, actually, I'd probably spit everything because you have a low delayed purchase multiplier. Like this number is often upwards of 40% for brands. Like if I didn't know any better and you just gave me a new account, I would assume it at 30 probably. Maybe for you guys, I would start it lower because you're a lower AOV, but especially if you get up to $100 AOV or something like that, 40% is pretty normal. So bid, I would probably, if I was you, especially when you're in a down period like this, where you have a little bit of room to like play with it because you're out of inventory, I would go to a one day click CAC CPA target of $38.46. If I was setting my bid cap, I'd set it right around there. A cost cap could be the same in your case. And I'm fine with you guys running cost caps, especially at a lower spend. So you go $38.46. There's another reason I'm fine with you guys running cost caps that I'll get to in a second, as opposed to bid caps. But even though I would probably run bid caps, but it's okay. But $38.46 is now the one day click cost cap that you would need, right? So you would actually punch that in. I'll show you exactly where, right? You would go to the ad set level. And if you wanted to do this, if you had switched this over, to one day click, okay, you can't edit a live one, so you'd have to duplicate the ad set. Go to one day click, get rid of your view impressions, and then I would just set this cost per result goal at $38, assuming that I had inventory to do it, right? I would do exactly what you guys are doing, right? Tick it down if I don't have inventory. But if I wanted to go break even on first purchase, if that was my goal, and it may not be, right? Now, if at the same time you're like, oh no, we want to make 20% on first purchase, then what you can simply do on this sheet is tag this 28-day click ROAS to this number, 20 break even, and now we've got the same number spit out, etc. But it's automatically tagged as first purchase. For that matter, you could really put this wherever you want and just go look and see kind of how it changes things. But as a baseline, it's set to break even. So this now becomes your cost cap at one day click. If you go to 7 day click, you can actually use the same thing. You don't need to change anything. We can just take this number as 23%, drop it down to 9%, and say this is now a 7 DC CPA, and now you've got a $34 cost cap. So it basically spits that out for you relative to first purchase break even as the goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, mostly. And basically, yes, it does. Thank you. So what it's saying is you're basically actually saying because of the laddering effect, we could acquire at a higher amount than we currently are because we can expect to get that revenue.
Yeah, well, it's in some ways it's a lower amount for you because you have view conversions and they're throwing things off. You could actually be thinking about this better. Now, you made money before, right? Because we said a 1.44 on 28-day click is break even. But let's go look again back in the ad account and say, let's go last month. And this is a little tricky because of the timing of these things. Actually, let's go to December where you guys really had the ramp and spend. Your 28-day click ran you at a 1.39. Oh, yeah, you ran at a 1.4. So you're right around break even still. But of course, your actual reporting is showing you a 1.6 and not that. So there's probably a slight overspend there. Again, I'm not worrying about it too much. It's really close. And it tends to be the case that 7-day click, 1-day view is pretty close to 28-day click because those view conversions kind of almost have the same effect of giving you some like bump on those. But I would just try to get it a little more precise. And yeah, but you're basically right about the concept, which is that if you get $38 CAC on 1-day click, what that will ladder to because of delayed purchase behavior is actually a $31 CAC, which is actually break even for you. And so yeah, that's the way that would work. Okay. So it helps you set your target based on the realization that you have to set a target today, even though you're not going to realize the full value of your spend till later, within 28 days. In fact, 28 days is an arbitrary cutoff. Some people are going to wait 45 days, but you probably don't want to like start playing that game too much. It's like a convenient cutoff date to go make the decision.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
All right, let's actually talk about another thing that jumps off the page to me when I look at your guys' brand. Move over to this instead. I don't know if anybody else did this the moment that I pulled this sheet up, but this is what I would have done right away with this graph. And this, by the way, this first time versus returning customer sales, I live in this chart for clients. And I just look, if it will naturally have orders in here as well. But if you just, in the column settings, if you have it include orders on the start, this chart will be orders. But if you just take orders out, this chart will actually be total sales. So when you first load it, it's just this first time versus returning customer chart in your reports. But yeah, the thing that jumped off the page to me is the purple. I immediately looked at this and thought, oh, you guys have real LTV. You guys are playing the game. And I'll say something about this business right away. Like if I could invest in this business, I not only believe in you two because you guys are hungry and smart, but I would invest in this business. And I'll tell you why right away. It's because you have high margin and very, very good LTV. And so what I did immediately is I looked at this and said, oh my gosh, look at the way this purple line is just consistently growing as you guys add customers into the mix. Really, really good. Not too surprising that you had like a big peak in November. Obviously with holiday, you probably had some special offer. It's also not too surprising that you had an October peak and then it came down a little bit in December and January because this November offer probably cannibalized some December customers. Plus you also lost some customer acquisition in here relative to these months. And so probably there's some weird timing things there. I'm not worrying about this little fall off in January at all. I think it's probably going to come back up and it looks like this number is going to kind of pass your January number soon in February. But the basic point is that you have real LTV. So what I immediately did is I went over to the cohort report in Shopify and looked at, and this is amazingly gracious of you guys to be willing to share this information. I don't actually know what the harm to doing that is, but people don't like to do it. So I appreciate it.
Well, you just said you're going to invest in our business, so you can do anything you want.
Yeah. Sorry to tell you that I don't have any cash. So
neither do we.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So the customer cohort analysis here, if you don't know how to get here, I'll just pull it up really fast. It's under this analytics tab, and then you go to this customer cohort analysis tab. What it will naturally load when you first pull it up is last 12 months retention rate. So what this is going to pull up is how many customers come back per month after they first buy from you. Month 0 is within the first 30 days. Month 1 is within the next 30 days, etc. And so you guys have these numbers that maintain for a long time. One thing to notice here is like, this is always the case. There's some drop off from the early months to later. And are you guys selling on subscription?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. That makes sense. Subscription brands always look this way. But even once you get into here, like these cohorts are pretty strong. People are kind of sticking with you. It's probably easiest to look. I mean, even in 2022, where all these cohorts are complete, I know you guys were a lot smaller then. People are sticking with you really consistently. There's very little churn happening in this business along the way, which is awesome. And so I was noticing that right away. And you guys are the perfect case for a cohort model forecast. Are you guys currently forecasting your LTV with a cohort model or anything like it?
Forecasting LTV, not yet.
Well, okay. Yeah.
Forecast, yes. Cohort-based forecast, yes. It's a combination of the CTC, like they had a really good model they put out, kind of replicated that, used that as our logic. Another thing, a shameless plug here, one of our buddies, Drew Fallon, he used to be the CFO at Mad Rabbit, is launching a finance. Oh, dude, he's awesome. And he's been so helpful to both of us. And he just launched a platform called Iris. They're using that same logic for a forecast-based model, but it's basically a complete FP&A model that we've recently started using more. So it's all real time, like financial planning analysis.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there, I could show you some of that later on. But yes, we are using a cohort-based forecast. And since implementing it, it's been pretty highly accurate, which is really cool to see too.
Amazing. I will totally link that in the show notes. So let's connect to Drew to make sure that we send people to the right place. Yeah, Drew's a really bright guy. So yeah, awesome. So the thing is that you guys are getting this new customer revenue in a way that's really significant and means that you're going to keep generating a whole bunch of money. Another way to look at this is amount spent per customer. And with these cohorts that are closed here, January is probably the only one that's truly fully closed. Maybe February as well. Like a simple way to look at this is to just take your last month number, which is this month 11, and divide it by your first order number to tell you the value of a customer over time. So let's say a January customer last year is worth $96 to you, but they spent on first purchase $39. That means there's 146% increase in the value of a customer over the course of a year, right? 146% increase. And so if we come back to my unit economics sheet, this number, this LTV, if a customer is worth essentially 2.5x over the course of a year what they were worth to you initially, you have this ability to go spend quite a bit of money to acquire that customer because you can make a lot of money over the course of a longer period of time. Now, my sheet subtracts the first order from this. So to make this work, you'd have to go 146% like that, not 246%, which if you just followed my math, there you go. But now here's something really interesting, right? Which is that when you guys acquire a customer at break even, you're actually going to have $45 in a little more than $45 in contribution margin over the course of a year. And that assumes you launch no other products that move this forward, right? If you launch your cleanser, I bet that number goes up. Actually, even some of the losses that you guys took earlier where you spent under probably are still coming out to be positive in total value for the business, because you have to really, like, you can go pretty far under and still be positive on 1 year LTV. And that's just 1 year, which again is an arbitrary cutoff. Like, that's actually probably lasting a little bit longer than that. And you guys can make a lot of money by having a bunch of returning customer revenue in the business, which is why everybody starts a skincare brand. High margin, high LTV
well, and I think like one thing
is pretty good. Look at this though. If we go to 0.8, you're still making money. If you go to 0.5, okay, now you're losing money. So if you go to 0.6, you're about break even. So you guys could actually do pretty well and still, or you guys could do pretty poorly and still make money over the long term. I'm not saying you should do that, for the record. I'm just saying you could theoretically and still be okay, which is great.
Yeah, and what's also cool on that, and I would because you just said something that's interesting. So again, like, you saw our sales, they kept going up. We were losing money, but our sales were going up. And this was, I think, the first time Kevin and I reached out to you was after you did one episode where you talked about, if I go into an account and I see that returning revenue is outpacing new revenue, like, I would literally consider taking on debt to fund that. And that's when we started even changing some other things, considering how we'd spend. Using Lifetimely as opposed to Shopify, and I would love to kind of dive deeper into the differences. Like, if you go to Lifetimely from our actual first month in business of April, like, our LTVs we're getting up into the 230% at 1 year. So that number actually looks even better when we have some really loyal customers who are from the beginning, have now spent every single month.
Yeah, Lifetime probably isn't subtracting the one either the way I was, right? Because what the number I just pulled was 240%, right? So yeah, it's possibly because of that. But Lifetime does show you this on better, more robust settings. Probably don't have time to go jump into it right now, but yeah, I think there's a lot more you could say about that. It is really helpful to see that though, and I think there are questions about like how aggressively you fund your growth. And this is actually another place where, this really gets into a strategy question, a financing question, etc. You're just the kind of brand that does maybe have more of a potential. There's potentially a case to be made to fund at a first order loss in a way that just isn't the case for a lot of other brands. I think it depends on so many things. It depends on goals, strategy, financing, all of that kind of stuff. And I would say there's some stuff to watch out for. You got to forecast carefully because there's a lot of forecasting risk that could happen in it. But what I have found is that those cohorts are actually, generally speaking, not very risky. Like, as you scale, my guess is your future customers will perform about the same way as your current customers, as long as you acquire them on the same product and the same offer. And even if the offer is a little bit more aggressive, like you give a 20% discount instead of a 10 or something like that, it'll probably perform about the same as a percentage. I just haven't seen this thing where these customers really, really fall off. It's a decision I would take really seriously about whether or not you'd want to fund at a first order loss at some point. Obviously, you guys are not in that spot right now, right? You're short on inventory, so you definitely don't want to do that. But yeah, there could be a case to be made to go do it, and you just have to model it and watch it really, really carefully, measure it week in and week out. The best brand I've ever seen at doing this, where they've done this really carefully and monitored it really, really closely, is Purdy and Fig, UK-based cleaning brand. I did an interview with Jack a while ago. Again, I'll put that link in the show notes. People should go check that episode out. I'm actually going to record with Jack again soon. By the time this comes out, it will probably be live, to talk more about the way they're measuring their LTV cohorts based off of different offers they're doing, because it's so compelling. And they've grown at a first order loss forever, and they've had massive, massive growth. Now, they have extreme LTV, but yeah, it can be a really important and powerful thing to look at. The key to doing it is measuring it carefully and tracking it consistently. So you have to forecast it carefully, and then you have to track it religiously. Every week, you need to look at how your returning customer revenue comes in relative to forecast. If you do that, you can start to get really, really aggressive, because you'll see very fast when things go badly.
I do want to just stress too, like, obviously we're talking about LTV, and ours obviously looks pretty solid, and just how to track it. But just to reiterate again, the intention, and be very intentional on the product you create. Like obviously, like, there's a little bit of luck in it, but you can put branding on anything that can only take you so far. A good product will always win. We were obviously very intentional on what guys specifically want, even down to the texture, the simplicity, having that 6-in-1, using those ingredients, like to really compete with the clinical community, having the derms help create that product, clinical chemists create that product. There's luck involved, but we were very intentional in the beginning on what guys specifically want, and be intentional with the product you create, because good products always win.
That's completely right. The way to drive retention in your business is with what the product is, first of all, right? You are selling a CPG, like consumable product. So that's part of it, right? People need to refill it. But also, if you want to raise your retention in your business, you need to do exactly what Kevin just said, which is you need to go back to the formulation. You need to make sure it's effective. You need to make sure that as people say, oh, it didn't work for me, you figure out why, see if you can solve that problem. That is like the key to doing a great job on this. It is not by hiring a retention manager. So I think email and SMS matter, but I just think they matter on the margins. They aren't going to make a bad retention product and do a good one, including in a category where there should be better retention. And so like it is at the product level and at the acquisition level that you are going to determine this. So yeah, I think that's really, really important. And I totally hear that, Kevin. It's exactly what I was saying earlier. I talk to people like you guys who like, you care about the thing working for people. You experienced the problem. You didn't want your eczema to be a problem anymore. And so it matters to you that it works to people. And like when that stuff comes out and when that shows up in the product, it makes a real big difference in the customer experience.
Obviously never stop improving. Like even just like with survey, we're constantly post-purchase surveys, sending out, trying to get as much data as possible. You can always improve, especially, the amount of times we've obviously screwed up as a lot of founders do building the business. Like there's going to be things you can fix and just consistently try to improve. And, if you have the customer focused in mind, then you should be good to go, hopefully.
Yeah, I think people do that. And in fact, when I talked to, I think it was an interview I did with Ezra Firestone. That conversation was mostly not tactical, but he was talking about that basic same point, that like the number one thing he was working on was just like reformulating the product, tweaks. He was making tweaks to just make sure it worked great for customers as the main driver of LTV. Just like he had, he's been working with Boom for a long time and driving that ship for a long time, and yet still going back and trying to make it better and better and better, and really, really caring what the customer says. It's really important. It's like so far outside the grounds of any of the tactical stuff we're talking about, but it's just really important.
And even too, just for like the marketing purposes, like the amount you gather from customers and how you can implement that into marketing, what they say, what they love about the product, actually using the verbiage that they use and actual like copy, like it's invaluable, honestly. So that's been one of the hugest things we've implemented, like credit to Ben on all the like post-purchase surveys and everything. Like that's been a huge help for us.
So let's hit one last topic here, which is I want to talk about this inventory situation you're in. When we talked last time, you guys said you had a 6-month lead time and you're paying completely upfront for products. I'm not too surprised to hear that your terms are not great, or I forget what the terms were exactly. You can clarify in a second. But I'm not surprised because you guys were not buying in huge quantities. It's not surprising to me that a manufacturer would kind of say to you guys like, okay, well, the barrier to entry is going to be a little bit higher for you than for other brands. We're not going to give you incredible terms on day one. Where are things at right now? What is the lead time on getting more of your core product in stock, and what are your terms at right now?
So our lead times right now are like 20 to 24 weeks. We placed another order in January, so we're expecting that in May. Right now, all of our like acquisition, we've dropped the budget so that basically what we're hoping is the 9,300 units we have are just going to last us right until the new ones come in. Again, we'll take home more cash on those, but we're losing out on momentum and scale. Simultaneously, then Kevin brought this up. It's a unique opportunity for us where we have started to source different manufacturers. We have found that our current process of using a turnkey that adds a middleman, they have less control over the supply chain. Going and working directly with the source is going to be able to slow or kind of make those lead times go faster. At the same time, like Kevin just made that great point about, there's opportunities to listen to what customers are saying, and you said this as well, and start to continue to iterate. So we already have this rock solid product, but there's things we can do to improve it. And Kevin's been really big on pushing us to enhance the product in this next go around. So we're currently sourcing other manufacturers in a way to get those lead times down while simultaneously having to work with the current status, which our payment terms have been 100% on delivery. If we want to move to a blanket PO structure, and we've talked to Lara over at More Staffing and like your episode, where if we want to go in the blanket PO route, what we're going to have to do is now shift back to 30% deposit, 100 or 70% when basically the finished goods release. So what we have to do, and this kind of, I made this point earlier of like with what happens when you have more cash is you can actually take on more projects. So what's going to happen for us at some point during the switchover of when we do find a different manufacturer, we're going to have already paid for finished goods, 100% on delivery. We're going to then have to put down a deposit for the new manufacturer. You can't actually have that conversation until you have enough cash to do that. So we're right now trying to find the formula, make sure the formula can be replicated correctly, enhance it. Kevin's like got some ideas on some of that stuff as well. And a lot of customer interactions have led to that. So keep the inventory flowing while simultaneously developing a new same product and getting the orders placed for that. Where we want to get to, and Dave talked about this on that episode you guys did a while ago of like just-in-time ordering. We'd really like to get closer to just-in-time. I think because of our experience, like that might be a little risky. What we'd like to do is basically have 1 month of held inventory at all times. So we're constantly going in like a retroactive 30-day window. But that's kind of where we're at. And, you know, it's funny how as every person we talk to, we say those lead times and everyone just makes the exact same face of pure disgust. 24 weeks is really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is like it's just going to make forecasting error so massive, right? Like it's just going to be so hard for you guys to do this because like I would say a business at your stage is borderline unforecastable. It just is. And it's because like up until about 10 million in revenue, you're just going to have too many moments where like Kevin gets in front of the camera and creates a new angle on an ad and your spend doubles. And that's not forecastable. It just isn't. And so what is forecastable about your business is the returning customer revenue. Once you see that, the problem is you're going to have an impossible time forecasting the spend and the new customer revenue. And that means that like a 6-month lead time is untenable completely. And also it means that that means you're gonna have to order so much inventory on a 6-month lead time that you're going to have to like shell out way more cash than you possibly can to do that at this stage of business. And you're going to be constantly stuck playing that game unless you're just placing an order every month for forever for 6 months down the road. And that sucks. So yeah, I agree. So you're manufacturing in China?
No, we manufacture in the US, but our packaging comes from, so our components come from China, US for the juice.
What's the lead time on components?
So it's funny. This has been like an interesting piece of working with someone where you have less of the, you know, Laura talks about it, getting open costing, downstream supply chain understanding. What we've always been told is our raws are what creates the bottleneck. So we see that from PO to goods being received in the US tends to be about 4 months on the components. And that's about 1 month of shipping. But then that's where the process goes to send them over to the lab. And then the lab starts filling where we still, and this is like, again, like, we're learning where we still have the least amount of knowledge about this is like, okay, if the components were coming sooner, like what is the absolute shortest you could get these raws? It seems that it's kind of a trickle effect where like the lab won't do certain actions until the components are sent to them or until they touch down or produced. So you're like waiting on the components, even though they're faster, but then the raws are what is the bottleneck.
Okay. Interesting. So you guys think there is a world where you can move to a manufacturing solution that gets this lead time significantly down, but what you're saying, it sounds like, is you're going to have to pay some more money up front because of the blanket PO that you'd be placing?
Yeah. So what we've heard from other manufacturers that we've talked to is that they feel confident they can get down into like this 16-week, 12 to 16 week consistently. And then through a blanket PO, more of like a 4 to like 6 week. As a result of that, though, what you have to do to stock those materials is the people need to be made right up front for anything they're going to stock. So we're going to have to pay up front for all of the raws, but then they'll stock them in higher quantities and release as is.
You have to do that because you only have to pay some up front, right? You said like 30% up front, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do that. You guys can generate enough cash in this business to do it, especially because of the LTV. You have the most magical thing in all of D2C, which is organic revenue, revenue that comes apart from ad spend. You probably don't feel it that much yet, but that returning customer revenue snowball is going to keep rolling down the hill and getting bigger and bigger and bigger as it rolls. And that's going to make it so that your business is going to produce a bunch of profit. I know you guys have told me you weren't really paying yourselves much, if you're paying yourself really at all at this point. I also know you guys are young and hungry and don't care that much at this stage of the business because you got big dreams. So you can eat a lot of ramen still. So in the short term, you can keep, just funneling cash into the business and like save Nobu for when you guys are killing it in 3 years. In the meantime, though, I think you have to figure that out because this lead time thing is going to kill you. It's going to make it impossible. And if you can actually get it to 4 to 8 weeks of the blanket PO, I think you can do really well. The other thing is, and this is really important. Well, how long until, do you have any expiration issues on your product? Like, does it go bad?
So we've done we have a 1-year stability claim. In reality, when you learn more about these claims, you could be heavily confident that that's longer. The tested claim is 1 year.
Yeah. So as long as you can basically take stuff off the shelf in like 6 months or something like that, you'll be fine. So stuff shouldn't sit around for too long on a shelf in a warehouse somewhere, right? But you've got some wiggle room there.
Yeah, and I mean, you've seen it from kind of just the sales numbers. Like, this is what's unfortunate. We were approaching 10,000 units a month, like following December, and I think we could have easily gotten quickly up to that 12.5 because we also on Amazon. So we do about 8 to 9 on D2C or Shopify, and then the other 2 to 2.5 come from Amazon. We ideally, again, with a blanket PO, we would order still. We wouldn't over order. We'd order in quantities of, say, this goes back to the forecasting. We're forecasting about 100,000 units, maybe a little over this year. Maybe you do your blanket POs in quantities of like 50,000, but you're just keeping that cycle going. And that right now is what we've been working on so much, is just getting a real inventory PO allocation strategy in place, because we've been flying by the seat of our pants for too long and it's gotten us into trouble too much. The terms haven't really helped our case. So what we want to just get to is like, this is what we're forecasting on the year. And we talked about this at your house. Like, it's so much more exciting. Yes, the top line dollar figure growth is always fun, but what's really exciting as business owners is when you say, this is our forecast, and you want to make that an aggressive forecast. You want to win, you want to scale, but like, this is our forecast and you stick to it, because then everything else downstream just happens as a function of that. Versus when we go forecast for November, December was significantly less than what we did. And now we're in the situation that we are. And like, that's just not fun. You want to be predictable, sustainable, and profitable growth.
I think that's right. And I think you're thinking about this the right way. Like, you don't have to have a blanket PO for the total number of units that you want, but to basically allow you to always have some safety stock on hand, give yourself some opportunity to scale and be able to scale up production really, really fast. I think that makes a ton of sense. I also think as you grow more, these things will all get easier because you'll be more and more valuable to manufacturers. But there's another beauty that you have, which is that you're single SKU. And so you actually can't get yourself into too much trouble by over ordering, because you don't have to guess which SKUs are going out the door. And so being single SKU, and even when you go to 3 SKUs, you're going to have a much easier time demand planning these kinds of things. And you're also not going to do this thing where you overorder a product that you can't move. That's where people get in real trouble. They have 3 years worth of inventory of a product on hand because they thought it was going to be a hit product and then they couldn't sell it. And then they're just like stuck with this thing that like technically has value, but is basically worthless because you can't turn it back into cash and you're discounting it by 70% or whatever, you just take a bath. So that's the beauty of it. So, okay, guys, we are out of time. There's so much more that I would love to say about this at some point. Maybe we'll do a follow-up episode as you guys keep untangling this. I would actually love to go deeper on the supply chain stuff, but it sounds like you've gotten some good advice there and going the right way. You mentioned Laura from More Staffing, More Supply Chain, helping you out with some of that stuff. I mentioned More Staffing as my ad read on this, my partner on these episodes. Laura is incredible. So if you were doing supply chain stuff, has she been great to work with, Ben, I assume?
So we haven't entered into an engagement yet. She's provided amazing advice, consulting, and we're kind of looking more closer to probably. Yeah, she's brilliant. And she's been so helpful. Literally, like we asked her, like, hey, could you type up some questions we should ask to our manufacturer? And she did that just like to help us out.
Amazing.
I think we will end up finding a way to work with them. Just again, cash flow wise for us, it has been a challenge. To your point, cool. Like if there is ever an opportunity to do a follow-up, I know like one thing we didn't get to it, like right now, Kevin's in the middle of building out our full creative funnel process, creative engine. And I think like we talked a lot of tactile operations stuff here. And it'd be amazing to go dive really deep.
When do you think you'll be able to scale again?
Ideally, we'll start spending more in March, April more. And then I think like May, June is where we're going to like really start ramping up again. But if we could do something before that, what Kevin's working on right now is so that when that day hits that we can scale again, he's going all in on being able to say like, we want to have 50 creatives on the bench and like a full process that like, we can just churn. So anything that prior helps us when we can scale would be amazing.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's see. Maybe we'll do a separate episode or we'll tack it onto this one, but let's talk about it. I would love to talk through creative process and buckets and all that kind of things. So I have opinions about this, gentlemen. I have opinions about it. So I'd be happy to share them. Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks so much for your time. You guys are great. Thanks so much for your generosity with all the information here. Go get yourself a No Bad Days hat. Even if you're not a men's skincare guy, I didn't even think about wearing mine today. I should have. Yeah, that's available at Pretty Boy. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. We appreciate you and everything you guys are doing.
There you have it. Opening the Books number 3 is in the books. I have now done Pretty Boy, Mixed by Nazarene, which is a great episode. I'm still working with Mixed. They're seeing continued growth at the time of recording this, which is awesome. And Beard Brand. The links to all of my past Opening the Books episodes are in the show notes, all of which you can get by going to my website, ajfgrowth.com/prettyboy. ajfgrowth.com/prettyboy. You can sign up to get all of the references from this episode for free emailed to you. And I will not spam your email, I promise you. But it's just an easy way for me to collect all of the different references that we made in this episode and get them all to you in one place. You can also find there my past episodes of Opening the Books. If you like this episode, you will also like those. And great news, I have another one coming. It is scheduled on the books. I'm going to coach an entrepreneur through a product release, a new product release and a major product release for their brand, something I haven't done before on this show that I think will be helpful to you as well. So make sure to subscribe to this show wherever you're watching, wherever you are listening. It will be helpful as well. If you have any feedback for me, I would absolutely love to hear that. You can reach me at podcast@ajfgrowth.com. Reach out to me on Twitter at Andrew J. Ferris. I also try to be really good about responding to the comments on YouTube, so you can go do that there and interact about this show. Any thoughts, any questions, any disagreements, anything like that, I would love to hear them from you. I really would. So please reach out to me in all those places. And of course, everything I'm doing is at ajfgrowth.com if you want to work with me, etc. Also, if you would like to do an Opening the Books episode with me, I am taking folks for my next episode. So it's free coaching for you. I'm going to coach you for free. I typically take an hour to 2 hours and give you a bunch of my time and attention. There's a little bit of prep work on my side as well. So I'm going to get into your business a little bit. All you have to do is be willing to share that with my audience. And so if you're interested in doing that, go ahead and send me an email at podcast@ajfgrowth.com and just let me know that you would like me to work with you on your business. I would love to talk to you about if you are a fit for this show. As always, thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to go check out my sponsor, who I love, More Staffing, by going to morenow.co/AF. Virtual assistants can be helpful. Virtual professionals can change your business. Go hire incredible professionals in the Philippines now by going to morenow.co/AF and work with More Staffing. Thanks so much for watching, for listening, like I said, and I will talk to you next time.